Over the last year, the world of NASCAR has been wrapped up in one of the most convoluted and publicly nasty lawsuits the sport has ever seen. Team owners Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin, and Bob Jenkins have filed an antitrust lawsuit against NASCAR's ownership, stating that it has used its monopolistic powers to leverage itself into a position to not only corner an entire market, but to abuse said leverage and to take advantage of the patrons in said market. What does all of this mean? How true are these accusations? And where do we go from here post-lawsuit? To start, let me clarify that I am not a lawyer, so in regards to in-depth legal information pertaining to this suit and the additional cases circling this, I am not an expert, and I will not attempt to fully explain how the legal proceedings and motions will commence moving forward. Instead, let's go over how all of this started. The charter agreement. All the way back in 2016, NASCAR introduced what is called the charter system, basically stock car racing's version of a franchising system, ensuring any team with one of these charters will have a permanent entry into every race for that season. Only 36 of them were handed out, and all were carried through the first 9 seasons of the charter deal. Entering 2024, the last year of the contract, NASCAR had just signed the biggest TV deal it had ever negotiated, and next up was finalizing the second ever charter agreement between the teams. This was, however, the first time a negotiation like this had ever happened in the sport. Teams had never uniformly negotiated together the way revenue would be split across the sport. Therefore, they used this to their advantage, and they brought up a plethora of issues they had with the current state of the sport. NASCAR was expecting these conversations to go relatively smoothly, so when the teams did this, conversations between the parties completely stalled out. The slow start became a problem immediately, as negotiations were already behind schedule. Initially, teams wanted to start discussions well before 2024, citing original questions being asked as far back as 2022. But NASCAR wanted to wait till after its TV deal, which was set to expire the same time the charter agreement was. The negotiation of the TV deal was also delayed and finished in late 2023, roughly 6 months behind schedule. This set up only 1 full year of talks between the teams and NASCAR, an extremely tight window to work in. Of the concerns that many of the teams brought to the table was the charters were temporary. Originally, there was a clause that allowed NASCAR to take charters away if a team performed poorly enough. The teams not only wanted to eliminate this clause, but also write into the new contract wording that charters would be guaranteed for as long as NASCAR existed. The officiating body did not want to do this, stating they can only guarantee the charter system and how it functions for as long as the TV deal is guaranteed, hence why they negotiated them at the same time. The teams, however, pointed to other sports leagues and how they function, stating that others face the same problem but still guarantee permanent franchises. Secondly, the teams wanted more money, citing that NASCAR's new car hadn't decreased cost at all, instead increasing due to it being comprised primarily of single-source parts. NASCAR thought they had already conceded enough money, and stated it needed a hefty piece of the pie to run the racetracks it owns. And lastly, the biggest point of all the teams made was they wanted more say in the decision-making that went into the rules, spending, and overall officiating of the sport. Something that had never been done or asked for in the history of NASCAR. Since the beginning of its existence, the France family has operated the sport like a monarchy. There has been the occasional driver versus NASCAR flare-up, but especially under the guise of Bill France Jr., the drivers and teams never really felt the France family abused their powers. Until now, it seemed. Rumors ran rampant about all sorts of outcomes. There were even reports about the teams leaving and making their own stock car series. But as the 2024 season went on, concessions were made on both sides. And closing in on the NASCAR playoffs, everything seemed to have reached a conclusion. The Friday before the first playoff race at Atlanta, the new contract was signed. The controversy was over for all except 2 teams, 23XI and Front Row Motorsports. They did not sign the deal. The 2 teams represented 4 cars in the 2024 season, and had both just recently purchased an additional 2 charters to make it 6 for the 2025 season. In essence, only 30 charters of the 36 signed the deal, and NASCAR turned its back on the 2 rogue teams, stating its intention on operating as is, and that 2 teams would need to work as open cars. They were no longer locked in the races after 2024. And while it may seem that these 2 rogue parties were in a vast minority as everybody else signed the deal, many of the teams still vocalized unhappiness, An outpouring of negative comments came gushing in, and rumors about how the negotiations went soured the thought of this being even a fair deal. Multiple sources reported that NASCAR had basically put a deal forth that was bloated and convoluted. It gave them only 1 hour to sign, or else. The way it was described basically meant the teams signed panicked and pressured. Now, how true that really is still unknown. Some teams corroborate that information, and others state that it was a fair situation. Regardless, everything seemed to have quieted down about the situation until October 2nd, 2024. Similar to the crash of the stock market in 1929, on a Tuesday in October, the landscape of NASCAR may have begun the process to change permanently forever. 23XI and Front Row filed an antitrust suit claiming NASCAR abused its powers to have complete control over the teams. The two teams hired lawyer Jeffrey Kessler and his legal group, the same organization that won the House v. NCAA case to get Division I college athletes paid for their play. You may know it as the NIL deal. You may think that NASCAR would want to settle this case immediately, to try and avoid a media storm. But they didn't. Instead, they doubled down and made it clear they were ready to fight this war. They immediately fought against the two teams' legal wishes, the first of which was them seeking an injunction, basically a court order that would let them run as charter teams for 2025, as the court proceedings would still be going on in the background. NASCAR fought, and on January 10, 2025, about 5 weeks from the Daytona 500, 23XI and Front Row were granted the injunction, and the teams were allowed to race. NASCAR didn't give up on trying to expel them from the sport, though. In early March of 2025, NASCAR filed their own antitrust suit against the teams, stating they abused monopolistic powers to get leverage on NASCAR for a better charter deal for the teams. Then, in an attempt to gain more information for the suit, the teams tried subpoenaing everybody they can think of. Every American sporting league and racing organization were requested to put forth legal documents, but most were able to avoid it. While this was going on, NASCAR had worked back into the courts to have the injunction reheard, and on June 5th, it was overturned. The teams, halfway through the year, had lost their charters now, and NASCAR was on the throttle trying to get them officially back in their grasp. The reason why they wanted the charters back in their ownership was to sell them to apparently new bidders that had popped up. Apparently the charters were hot commodities, and NASCAR had buyers lined up out the door, ready to take the charters that sat now vacant due to the injunction. Additionally, there were the two charters that Front Row and 23XI had bought that were under the old charter agreement from the dying Stewart-Haas Racing. These ghost charters were classified by NASCAR as inactive, which was quite a strange decision because SHR signed the charter deal. Then they sold them to teams who didn't sign the charter deal. And now you can see how this is getting complicated. What will come of these two charters that sit in limbo currently is unknown. Some rumor that potentially the France family who owns NASCAR might run their own team, but there is no substantial evidence behind that. Currently, as we sit, we are still in the discovery phase, as the sides collect evidence, still holding out a sliver of hope that they can settle this outside of the courts. The date is set for December 1st of 2025, the day that will start a long and arduous process that could take years to complete. In the end, what do each side want from this? The teams state they want to divest NASCAR, basically to separate the officiating body from owning the tracks and managing the building of the cars, making them only the officiating body and nothing else. With this, it would allow the potential for someone to use the tracks and cars to make their own stock car series, in essence, creating a rival NASCAR organization. They also want to be included in the charter agreement and be paid a hefty monetary amount. NASCAR wants to continue operations as normal and basically ban Front Row Motorsports owner Bob Jenkins and 23XI owner Michael Jordan from ever being in the sport again due to their defamation of the officiating body. There is so much more to this story than was discussed here, and this video could probably be an hour long or more. So to sum things up, let me clarify that there is no good guy in this case, and there's no clear-cut favorite for who's going to win it. The only thing that this case jeopardizes is the sport. This will transform the landscape of stock car racing in America like we have never seen before. Teams will leave, rules will be changed, and feelings are going to get hurt. It could very well be that by the end of this suit and all the proceedings after it, we might be talking about something we never thought we would be. A stock car racing landscape without NASCAR.